Myth. The Lead K bill is a mandate for American Sign Language. This is not true. The Lead K bill does not require American Sign Language. The bill provides for language milestone information and assessments for kids who use one or both of these languages of American Sign Language and English. For purposes of the bill, English includes spoken English, written English, or English with the use of visual supplements.
Myth. Requiring assessments of children with disabilities and not requiring them of other children is discriminatory and a civil rights violation. This is not true. Any assessment provided must comply with federal law that such assessments are selected to accurately reflect the child's developmental level. Again, with respect to the above, any assessments must be administered in compliance with federal law requiring the assessment to be conducted in a non-discriminatory manner, in the native language of the child or family, and by qualified personnel. The Lead K bill simply requires a language assessment to be included as part of IFSP and IEP assessments.
Myth. I want my deaf child to learn how to listen and speak and to assimilate into hearing society without using sign language, and the Lead K bill does not support this. This is not true. The Lead K bill does not and will not interfere with the family's decision to have their deaf child learn to listen and speak. Again, these assessments are conducted in one or both languages, American Sign Language and English. Language is the family's decision.
Myth. Federal law already requires an assessment. State law can't require an assessment. This is not true. State law cannot require less than federal law requirements, but state law can provide more protection than what federal law provides. IDEA leaves room for the state to interpret the federal rules and pass their own laws. Thus, a state law providing for language inclusion is not in conflict with federal law in any manner.
Myth. An assessment must be deemed to be appropriate for the individual child and not be restricted to just language. This is not true. While Lead K requires inclusion of a language development assessment, it does not restrict other assessment domains. As required by federal law, assessment materials must be appropriate to assess specific areas for developmental needs and used for specific purposes for which they were designed.
Myth. The data collection does not protect the privacy and confidentiality of the children and families involved. This is not true. Privacy and confidentiality will be protected and preserved. Any data collection and any implementation of this bill must be consistent with federal law regarding the privacy of pupil information and be consistent with federal law regarding the education of children with disabilities.
Myth. The assessment must be appropriate for an individual child not selected from a list created by a work group. In fact, existing assessment materials as required by federal law must be appropriate to assess the specific areas of developmental need and are used for specific purposes for which they were designed. The bill requires language development inclusion but will not prevent the IFSP team or the IEP team from utilizing any assessment the team sees fit to best serve the individual child.
Myth. The advisory board takes away the autonomy of the IFSP and IEP teams that are charged with providing individualized plans for each child. This is not true. The advisory board is a short-term entity made up of volunteers whose role is to identify existing resources already developed to be made available for use by families, local education agencies, and the IFSP or IEP team. Once that identification is done, the advisory board is done. The advisory board will not and cannot replace the critical function of the IFSP or IEP team.
Myth. The advisory board does not include the parents or caregivers as essential members of the process. This is not true. The bill's advisory board includes parents and caregivers as essential members of the process.
Myth. Some children who are deaf or hard of hearing are not in the special education system, yet this law would require them to be assessed. This is not true. Any assessment must be conducted in compliance with federal law, which requires both parental notification and consent. So a family, as they see fit, can either choose to or to not participate.
Myth. Lead K places additional responsibilities on educators. This is not true. Educators doing assessments is not a new or additional responsibility for them. they are already required to do assessments. The Lead K bill simply requires utilizing one with language milestones. Federal law defines an assessment as an ongoing procedure used by qualified personnel, such as educators, to determine the individual child's present level of performance and early intervention or educational needs.
Myth. A family who has a deaf or hard of hearing child is forced to participate in the assessment. This is not true. Any assessment must be conducted in compliance with federal law, which requires both parental notification and consent. So it is a family choice to participate or not.
Myth. The proposed law does not address the rights of non-English speaking children, children who are not eligible for special education, or children with unique needs. This is not true. Any assessment is administered in compliance with federal law requiring the assessment to be conducted in a non-discriminatory manner, in the native language of the child or family, and by qualified personnel.